Okay. So our group topic that we got to research is the Renaissance and cartography. Our group members include Kalisa Christian, me, Soleil Baker, and Daniel Davis. Yes. What was the Renaissance? The Renaissance was a period in European history marking the transition from Middle Ages to modernity. The Renaissance was associated with great social change. Kalisa, would you like to read this slide?
Okay. What is cartography? Cartography, the art and science of graphically representing a geographical area, usually on a flat surface such as a map or chart. It may involve the superimposition of political, cultural, or non-geographical divisions onto the representation of geographical area.
Soleil?
Sully is not in the group.
I'll read.
Okay.
Cartography in the European Renaissance. Cartography in the European Renaissance treats the period from 1450 to 1650, long considered the most important in the history of European mapping. Scientific advances, appropriations of classical mapping techniques, burgeoning trade routes, all such massive changes drove an explosion in the making and using of maps.
The persons who aided in the European exploration. European exploration of the New World in the 15th and 16th centuries, including the voyages made by Christopher Columbus, John Cabot, Alonso de Ojeda, Amerigo Vespucci, Pedro Alvarez Cabral, Ferdinand Magellan, Juan Sebastian de Cano, Giovanni de Verrazzano, Jacques Cartier, Sir Francis Drake, and many others.
Mhm.
Reasons they may have went on those voyages. They may have went on those voyages for the sake of their economy and religion. They wanted to improve their economy by acquiring more spices, gold, and better and faster trading routes. They also wanted to spread their religion, Christianity.
Some materials used in cartography. Firstly, cartographic materials are defined as spatial data presented graphically in the form of maps, atlases, globes, and three-dimensional maps and terrain models. This is a picture of the earliest extant terrestrial globe, which was made in 1492 by Martin Behaim. The atlas was a peculiar invention made by Gerardus Mercator. Yes, and that's the picture of it. We have come to the end of our presentation. I hope each and every person has learned something from it. Thank you.
Very good. Excellent presentation. Next group, group two, Denton Edwards Groves, full sharing. Very good. But before we go on, that was very good. Group one, the it is very important to remember those names of persons who would have created maps and the first map that was created. Very good information, and it will aid in your writing. So you have the evidence when you're writing your for the different questions that you will get in the exam. Very good presentation. Group 2.
Good morning, everybody. Group 2 is presenting the Caraval and how it aided with the European exploration. So in this group, we have Jedidia Grooves, Kaylee Edwards, and me, Anit Denton. So who invented the Caraval? Improvements were made in shipbuilding. Prince Henry, the navigator of Portugal, the son of King John of Portugal, for over 40 years devoted his private fortune and his energy into maritime enterprise. His shipbuilders produced a new type of ship known as a caravel. The caravel was developed in about 1451 and soon became the preferred vessel for Portuguese explorers such as Diego, Diego, uh, Diego Cao, Bartholomew Diaz, or Gaspar and Miguel Corte Real, and by Christopher Columbus. Kelly, would you like to read the next slide?
How was the caravel built? The design of caravels underwent changes over the years, but a typical caravel of the late 15th century may be described as a broad-beamed vessel of 50 or 60 tons of burden. Some were as large as 160 tons. About 75 feet, 23 meters long, the typical caravel had 2 or 3 pole masts, flattened ridge with triangle sails. Later versions added a fourth mast with square sails for running before the wind. Caravels were usually built with a double tower at the stern, the after castle or stern castle, and a single tower in the bow, the forecastle. As a type, caravels were smaller and lighter than the Spanish galleons of the 16th century.
Jedidia? Is Jedidia here? Okay.
Not seeing her.
Okay. Clearly, the caravel revolutionized European transportation. This technology made it possible for European explorers, fishermen, and merchants to expand their horizons by providing the ability to travel further and faster. Also, it had more cargo space and was more Can somebody please tell me what that is?
Maneuverable.
Maneuverable than other ships that was in existence at the time. One could argue that it played a major role in the rapid colonization of the New World. These are these is pictures of the caravel. Yes, it was pretty big. This is the Prince Harry, the navigator of Portugal. And that's the end of our presentation. I hope you guys learned something, took something from it, and have a good day.
All right. Thank you very much. Good presentation. Just to reinforce that the caravel, the ship, as in the presentation, it mentioned that it was faster, so it was able to go very far in terms of for exploration for the Europeans. And remember, one of the main purpose of the Europeans exploring is to get cargo. Cargo meaning they're going to get goods. They wanted spices, they wanted gold, they wanted natural resources. And so with building this ship in with how they would have built it would have provided enough cargo space for them. All right, very good presentation. 3, Hemmings, James, and Christina.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, good morning.
So, our group got the compass, the astrolabe, and the hourglass. Okay. The compass is an instrument containing a magnetic pointer which shows the direction of magnetic north and bearings from it. The compass works by detecting the Earth's natural magnetic fields. Compasses often display markings for angles in degrees in addition to, or sometimes instead of those. North corresponds to 0 degrees and the angles increase clockwise. So east is 90 degrees, south is 180 degrees, and west is 270 degrees. The compass also tells which direction an object is from you. Its bearing and keep you following a straight line of travel. It works as an ON for maps, aligning a map with the actual ground. It also helps with triangulation, determine your location with a map. When compasses is used, the rows can be aligned with the corresponding geographic directions. For example, the north mark on the rose points northward. The astrolabe. The astrolabe is a portable device used by sailors to help them find their way by measuring the distance of the sun and the stars above the horizon. The astrolabe is a two-dimensional model of the celestial sphere which helps determine latitude, which is important in navigation. The name has its origin from the Greek words astron and lambanian, meaning the one who catches the heavenly bodies. The earliest astrolabe was invented in the Hellenistic civilization by Apollonius of Perga between 220 and 150 BC, often attributed to Hipparchus. Okay. While Hipparchus is given credit for the original astrolabe, a man named Abraham Zacuto modified it during the 15th century. Until Zacuto astrolabes were made of only wood. The hourglass. The hourglass is an early device used for measuring intervals of time by passing sand from one cup to another. Around the 10th century AD, the hourglass, also known as sunglass, was invented to mark the passage of hours. The first hourglass was invented by a French monk, Liutprand, in the 8th century AD. For ancient navigation, the technique which was used to find the direction and distance traveled by a ship was referred to as dead reckoning. When the sun from the top had fallen completely to the bottom, sailors knew a certain amount of time had passed. There were several types of hourglasses, but the most common hourglasses were the 4-hour and half-hour sizes. The hourglass was used with the chip log. This was a piece of wood attached to a long rope that had knots placed at equal spacing every 5 feet, which was used for measuring the speed of the ship. And I hope this presentation was useful.
All right, very good presentation. So just a recap from This group 3, the compass, was used for direction and to align the map with the shipping route. And also the astrolabe was used to determine latitude. Remember that the earth is divided into latitude and longitude, which it also helps with direction. So both of the two instruments were used for direction. And while the hourglass is what was also called the sunglass, was used to measure the speed of the ship. All right. So we know for sure if Europeans are inventing, they are improving how ships are being built, right? They are improving how maps were built, or they are now creating more maps using various different techniques. And they're also using new instrument, creating new instrument or modifying, because from the presentation we have realized that, for example, the hourglass and the astrolabe was actually something that they existed before, but in the 15th century at the time of exploration, they were modified, right? And so with all of these modification and improvement with these equipments, it is clear that it will it for Europeans, it make the exploration very easy for them. All right, so very good presentation, ladies. Very good presentation. Group 4, Lorraine, McLeish Rihanna, and Gordon, Gabriel Gordon.
Sir? Sir?
You can go ahead and share the screen.
Sir?
Yes,
For the PowerPoint, Gabriel has it and I don't see her in the meeting.
so none of you have the PowerPoint. Gabriel is in the group.
Sir, she's the one who made the PowerPoint and we gave her the info, but I don't see her in the group.
Okay. Group 4, sorry, group 5, the printing press and exploration.
Yes, sir. I'm sharing the screen.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm trying to do it now.
Okay.
Are you guys seeing my screen? Hold on, wait.
Yes, we're seeing your screen, but we're seeing two things actually. Which one you want to share? Okay.
Okay, printed press and exploration. Background. The invention of printed press by Johannes Gutenberg helped bring about the period of mass communication. Revolutionary ideas which were spread much faster and people were getting more enlightened, resulting in challenges to status quo. Scientists, inventors, explorers, and tradesmen were accorded to the status quo. Were accorded an opportunity to communicate effectively and share ideas, which served to heighten their curiosity and of discovery. Thus, during the period of exploration, the printed press helped in mass production of information recorded by explorers. The information was then widely shared not only with the general populace, but also with the other explorers. This the spread the spread of this information generated support of exploration among the public and also provided scientists and inventors with opportunities to improve on systems and tools used in exploration. Additionally, the printed press enabled the wide sharing of information regards to challenges facing and explorers, which helped in developing solutions and to address those challenges, especially with regards to navigation. Impact of the printing press. Gutenberg's invention made a dramatic impact when it reached the public. At first, the noble classes looked down on it. To them, hand inked books were a sign of luxury and grandeur, and it was no match for the cheaper mass produced books. Those press print materials were at first more popular with the lower classes. When word spread about printing press, other print shops opened and soon developed into an entirely new trade. Printing text became a new way to spread information to vast audiences quickly and cheaply. Academics benefited from dissemination of schoolery and ideas, and even politicians found that they could garner the public's interest through printed pamphlets. An important side effect was that people could read and increase their knowledge more easily now, whereas in the past it was common for people to be quite uneducated. This increased the discussion and development of new ideas. Another significant effect was the printing press was largely responsible for Latin's decline as other regional languages became the norm in locally printed materials. Invention and history of the printed press was most of the most of us tend to take printed materials for granted, but imagine life today if printed press had never been invented. We would not have books, magazines, or newspapers. Posters, flyers, pamphlets, and mailers would not exist. The printed press allow us to share a large amount of information quickly and in huge numbers. In fact, the printed press is so significant that it has come to be known as one of the most important inventions of our time. It drastically changed the way our society developed. In this article, we will explore how the printed press was invented as well as how it affected culture. Before the printed press was invented, any writings and drawings had to be completely painstakingly by hand. Several different materials were used to transcribe books: clay and papyrus, wax and parchment. It wasn't just anyone who was allowed to do this. Such work usually reserved for scribes who lived and worked in monasteries. Scriptorium. The monasteries had a special rule called the scriptorium. There the scribe would work in silence, first measuring the outlining the page layouts and then carefully copying the text from another book. Later, the illuminator would take over and add designs to and embellishments to the pages. In In the Dark Ages and Middle Ages, books were usually only owned by monasteries, educational institutes, or extremely rich people. Most books were religious in nature, and in some cases, a family might be lucky enough to own a book, in which case it would be a copy of the Bible. Early opinions about the books. How were the books made in earlier times? Changes in the history of printing books. Inspiration and inventing of printing press. Around the late 1430s, a German man named Johann Gutenberg was quite desperate to find a way to make money. At the time, there was a trend in attaching small mirrors to one's hat or clothes in order to soak up healing powers when visiting places or icons. The mirrors themselves were not significant, but Gutenberg quite noticed how lucrative it was to make a mass amount of cheap products. During the 1300s to 1400s, people had developed a very basic form of printing. It involved letters or images cut on blocks of wood. The block would be dipped in ink and then be stamped onto paper. Gutenberg already had previous experience working at a mint, and he realized that if it could be used to cut blocks within a machine, he could make the printing process a lot faster. Even better, he would be able to produce text in great numbers. Gutenberg's printing press, a movable type. Instead of using wood blocks, Gutenberg used metal instead. This became known as the movable type machine, since the metal block letters could be moved around to create new words and sentences. With this machine, Gutenberg made the very first printed book, which was naturally a reproduction of the Bible. Today, the Gutenberg Bible is an incredibly valuable, treasured item for its historical legacy. How printing press works. With the original printing press, a frame is used to set groups of type blocks. Together, these blocks made words and sentences. However, they are all in reverse. The blocks are all inked, and then a sheet of paper is laid on the blocks. All of this passes through a roller to ensure the ink is transferred to the paper. Finally, the ink is lifted, and the reader can see the inked letters that now appear normally as a result of the reverse book. The printing presses were operated by hand. Later, towards the 19th century, other inventors created a stem powered printing press that did not require a hand operator. In comparison, today's printing presses are electronic and automated and can print much faster than before. Today, there are multiple types of printing press for a specific type
One
of.
second, please. Your time has expired. Sorry about that. But before we go, how the printing press is linked to expiration? How is it linked to expiration?
Sorry, it's linked to expiration because they would print different maps. So when they would print maps, it would be easier for them to explore around.
Is it maps alone?
Not only maps, sir, like
Uh-huh.
different like like different journals that people would write in when they explore.
Yes, very good. Very good. Excellent. Very good background information on the printing press.
Yes, sir. And the people are in the group is Ariana Morrison, Anna Alicia Robinson, and Janelle Norman.
All right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
The next group, the next group is group 6. Group 6, Sawyer Sterling Taylor.
Sir, I'm presenting.
Go ahead, you can share the screen.
The European exploration or age of exploration, approximately from the beginning of the 15th century until the middle of the 17th century, is an informal and loosely defined term for the period in the European history in which extensive overseas exploration, led by the Portuguese, emerged as a powerful factor in European culture, most notably the European rediscovery of the Americas. It also marks an increased adoption of colonialism as a national policy in Europe. Several lands previously known to the Europeans were discovered by them during this period, although most were already inhabited. Navigational tools assisted the European explorers in finding their way across the ocean. Navigational tools are used to be able to travel around without getting lost. There are lots of navigational instruments that were used throughout history that have helped explorers to find their way around the world. Navigational tools such as the quadrant, hourglass, windlass, crossstaff, sundial, compass, and maps were used to navigate. In this project, we'll be looking at the first 5 instruments. Quadrant. The quadrant received its name because it is 1/4 of a full circle. In fact, quad means 4. It had much use even before it went to sea to help navigators. For the sailor, it was first used to measure the height of Polaris, the pole star. While the earliest documented use of the quadrant at sea is in the mid 1400s, it was it was in use well before by astrologers and land surveyors. It became important to the Europeans when the age of exploration began in the early 1400s. The pole star moved very little at night because it sits at the North Pole. It's about 1 degree away from being exactly at the North Pole today, and it was about 3.5 degrees off in the time of Christopher Columbus. Until the age of exploration, Europeans traded close to well-known coasts, going north or south, or they traded along the east-west routes of the Mediterranean. They didn't need to know the latitude. Though they began to travel into unknown waters off West Africa, the need for the pole star and determining latitude became important.
Hourglass. The Europeans were the founders of the hourglass and were known for their exceptional glass making skills. The sandglass or hourglass was invented to mark the passage of hours. Early explorers, especially those at sea, needed to mark not only the length of their watches but also the time it took to reel in and out the rope attached to the ship log.
The windlass. The windlass is a device used for moving heavy weights. It was invented by the ancient Greek scientist Archimedes and was used for general purposes such as to draw water from wells or to aid in lifting heavy construction equipment. Typically, a windlass consists of a horizontal cylinder barrel which is rotated by the turn of a crank or belt. A winch is affixed to one or both ends, and a cable or rope is wound around the winch, pulling a weight attached to the opposite end. During the Middle Ages, the windlass was used to raise materials for construction of buildings. By the late Middle Ages, most European crossbows employed a windlass as a cocking mechanism, which helped to pull heavier crossbows. Windlasses are sometimes used on boats or ships to raise the anchor. These are called anchor windlasses. Cross staff. The cross staff was a navigational tool used to measure the angle between the horizon and a celestial body, such as the sun or stars. By knowing this angle, a navigator could then determine his latitude and direction. The invention of the traditional cross staff for use at sea was inspired by a kamal, a navigational tool often used by the Arabs during the medieval period. A navigator would hold it his eye and make measurements to determine altitude. By knowing the altitude, the navigator could then determine latitude and eventually longitude. But the cross staff had its challenges. For one, using it to sight the sun could be dangerous to the user's eye. Navigators and sailors who used the cross staff and similar tools could lose their eyesight from staring at the sun. Also, use of the cross staff required the observer to look at two places at once, the bottom of the staff on the horizon and the top part for the celestial body. The cross staff was used for centuries until newer tools such as the back staff became more widely used.
Sundial. A sundial, the earliest type of timekeeping device, which indicates the time by the position of the shadow of some object exposed to the sun rays. As the day progresses, the sun moves across the sky, causing the shadow of the object to move and indicating the passage of time. And the northwest sense of the word, it consists of a flat plate, the dial, and a gnomon, which casts a shadow onto the dial. As the sun appears to move across the sky, the shadow aligns with different hour lines, which are marked on the dial to indicate the time of day. The style is the time-telling edge of the gnomon, though a single point or nodus may be used. The gnomon casts a broad shadow. The shadow of the style shows the time. The gnomon may be a rod, wire, or metal casting. The style must be parallel to the axis of the year, the axis of the Earth's rotation, for the sundial to be accurate throughout the year. The style's angle from horizontal is equal to the sundial's geographical latitude. So the Europeans use this to tell the time of day.
All right.
Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something.
Thank you very much. So we know for sure that the instruments that were used also, very good presentation group, were used. Where is this? The instruments that were actually used were that the group described were also help when it comes to making navigation very easy. All right, at this time. The next group, Thompson, Walker, and Williams. Thompson, Walker, and Williams.
Sir, I'm going to screen share.
No problem.
Excuse me, sir.
Go ahead.
Nichelle Sterling is asking if you can let her into the class again, please.
I just did. Thank you very much. Go ahead for me, please.
Sir, can you see my screen?
We're seeing your screen, but we're not seeing the slide. You have, okay, we're seeing the slide now. Go ahead.
Weapons and exploration. Several factors helped the Spanish capture the native population. A major factor that aided the Europeans was their weapons. Using sophisticated weapons such as steel, swords, crossbows, and guns helped the Spanish against local people. They also had another advantage over the natives, which was horses. They fought on horseback versus the natives who fought on foot. Europeans in the age of exploration and expansion held a significant military advantage over nearly all of the people they encountered when they traveled to other parts of the globe. The swords. In close combat, a rider would use his sword. Steel Spanish swords of the conquest were about 3 feet long and relatively narrow, sharp on both sides. The Spanish city of Toledo was known as one of the best places in the world for making arms and armor, and a fine Toledo sword was a valuable weapon indeed. They finally made weapons, did not pass inspection until they could bend in a half circle and survive a full force impact with a metal helmet. The fine Spanish steel sword was such an advantage that for some time after the conquest, it was illegal for natives to have one. The harquebus. So it's harquebus?
Yes.
The harquebus. Spanish foot soldiers could use
Harquebus.
Okay. Spanish foot soldiers could use a variety of weapons. Many people incorrectly think that it was firearms that doomed the New World natives, but that was not the case. Some Spanish soldiers used a harquebus instead of a harquebus, a sort of early musket. The harquebus was undeniably effective against any one weapon opponent, but they are slow to load, heavy, and firing one is a complicated process involving the use of a wick, which must be kept lit. The harquebuses were most effective for terrorizing native soldiers who thought the Spanish could create thunder. The crossbow. Like the harquebus, the crossbow was a European weapon designed to defeat armored knights and too bulky and cumbersome to be of much use in the conquest against the lightly armored. Quick natives, some soldiers used crossbows, but they're very slow to load, break or malfunction easily, and their use was not terribly common, at least not after the initial phase of the conquest. Conquistador armor. Spanish armor, mostly made in Toledo, was among the finest in the world. Encased from head to foot in a steel shell, Spanish conquistadors were all but invulnerable when facing native opponents. Most conquistadors wore a full set of armor, which consisted of a heavy breastplate, arm and leg greaves, a metal skirt, and protection for the neck and throat called a gorget. Even parts of the body, such as elbows and shoulders, which required movement, were protected by a series of overlapping plates, meaning that there were very few vulnerable spots on a fully armed conquistator. A full suit of metal armor weighed about 60 pounds, and the weight was well distributed over the body, allowing it to be worn for long periods of time, which without causing much fatigue. It generally included even armored boots and gloves or gauntlets. Sir, that's it.
All right, but how did these weapons aided when it with exploration?
Sir?
How did the weapons aided exploration?
So because they used it to defeat the indigenous people.
Yes, that is true. But before they even found out that there was any indigenous people, right?
Yes, sir.
Because remember, Columbus came and he arrived in the Caribbean in quotation buck-ups.
Yes, sir.
So once you're leaving your country to explore, you need weapons to do what? I'm leaving my house.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Sir, I wasn't going to say anything.
Go ahead.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to ask you to speak.
So before I leave my house in the morning, well, when I was going to school, there are a few things that I ensure that I have. So one, I leave my house and I ensure that I protect all my valuable things with me. The next is that I have a bottle of a pepper spray with me also. I go into the car and I ensure that once I reach into the car, I close all the doors and also what do you call it now? So you close the doors, ensure that the windows are up.
So, sir, they use the weapons
what am I doing?
themselves. They use the weapons to protect themselves and their soldiers.
Very good. So that is one. So before you explore, you're going into the sea, you don't know what to expect. So with the weapons, it gave them some form of security to say that once we are going to explore, then once we have all of these weapons, then we are better able to defend ourselves if we meet up with any form of enemies, right? So very good presentations. And students, please note the different weapons that were produced during this period. Go ahead for me, please.
Sir, could you look in the chat?
Yes, you can go ahead. Or the time has expired already. So guess what? When we meet again on Monday, I'll allow you to present for the first 5 minutes, the other group.
Thank you, sir.
All right, ladies, ensure that everybody has the presentation. All right, ladies, very good presentations. Keep up the good work. We meet again on Monday. Remember, for tomorrow, you're going to go online. Is online you're going? Yes. I believe that you have a work to do in Google Classroom tomorrow. Where is it? Grade 10? Yes, you have an activity on Google Classroom tomorrow. So do the activity for tomorrow morning. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.
Bye,
Bye
sir.
bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye-bye.